Good morning, everyone. My name is Nicolas Rousseau, and I'm product manager for FlexNet manager and Flexera One ITAM. And today, once a month, I will be glad to spend 1 hour with you on the best practices sharing. So this is the 8th session of these some best practice webinars. And I will be happy to go through the news as a first step. And then to answer the previous session questions. Previous session was around management of hybrid applications. And I will go for 1 hour or nearly 1 hour around a base topic, which is managing customizations with ITAM, Flexera One ITAM, and FlexNet Manager. So the goal is to have a very, hands-on session. I will share my screen. I will share some presentations, and hopefully you will learn today a lot around how to manage and extend the value of ITAM, Flexera One ITAM, or FlexNet Manager using customizations. I will switch off my camera just to focus on the PowerPoint, and let's start with this session. Okay, so I hope you hear me well. And the idea that, so let's start with this session. So just first on the agenda, we'll go through the last session pointers and answers to questions, then news, and then I will go through step-by-steps context around how you can customize FlexNet Manager on-prem and Flexera One ITAM, which is the cloud version of FlexNet Manager. I will expand a little bit how to extend the fields through custom properties, which is valid both on-prem and on cloud. I will also go through the automations that you can create on-prem or even or also with Flexera One ITAM, which have different approaches. I will then go through the customizations of inventory imports and creating custom SQL report, which is an on-prem only possibility because you need to change the database content, and even creating custom web reporting objects. So hopefully you will see this is quite documented and illustrated, but you will get precise explanations and how to on these topics. So the last session was on managing hybrid applications with ITAM and FSM. The recording and PowerPoints have been uploaded on the community. So if you click on this link, that will be shared at the end of the session. So one thing, every session gets recorded, and I will post in the events and webinar. I will post the new version of the recording will be posted like this presentation. The detailed agenda also will be posted, and the presentation used, or one or more presentation actually, will be shared in this blog post, and we'll have so you will get the recordings and the material shared. So this is what I presented last month in April. And if you want to go back, if you had no chance to attend this session, you can go back to this recording or to the presentation where I was in details talking about how the data like Microsoft 365 subscriptions and online usage can be collected from SaaS Manager or from the beacon, and how you can how the data is imported into ITAM, into FlexNet Manager, and how the compliance and optimization can be addressed. So the questions, there were not so many questions actually for this session. The first question was, will the recording be available? So yes. And the second one was, are you going to cover Microsoft 365 collected by the beacon? And you can check, these were two topics that were covered, and the two answers are yes. Let's move on, and let's go to the news. No big news for this week. We have a minor version, which is 2022 R1.1, which is released for cloud customers. It's mostly a technical version. There is no big, version and big feature in this version. One, however, which is the Horizon integration. So if I go to my preferred website to check, documentations, let's go to docs.flexera.com. You pick up the FNMS cloud, and you will see that in the feature by release, you will get more details about this just released R1.1, 2022 R1.1. And so one big feature, which is ability to collect the Horizon data. Okay, yeah, and sorry, I get the information that I'm not sharing my screen, so it doesn't help. So we'll be sharing my screen now. Start screen share. Okay. So I'm sharing my entire screen. Here we go. And hopefully we can go back to the slides. Okay, so just to start from the beginning, but there was not a lot that I showed so far. So yeah, welcome to this call. The news, the list of customization we'll be going through. This is the agenda. The recording and the PowerPoint have been uploaded on the community. And if you click on the link, you get this, detailed agenda and the recording. And also the uploaded documents. And I was, talking about the news, and the first one I wanted to share is this new release that you can find going by on docs.flexera.com. So if you go here, you pick up FlexNet Manager Suite feature release by release, and here, this is the list of things that got released this week. So it's a mix, depending on where you are located, you got the update, or you will get the update in the very next days. So the Horizon adapter for collecting a non-persistent VDI data is available in this 2022 R1.1 for cloud customers. And there is a new IBM VPC license consumption report. So and some new features, around PBU per core in the license consumption report. So it's 2 or 3 announcements on the IBM side, one new inventory source, and a number of fixes or announcements that have been applied. So I will go back to the presentation and go back to the slide. No question, no specific question for the last session. And I just wanted to, on the news side also to share a new post that has been released, that I released actually on the 19th of April, which it could be called, the best practice hub. So I keep showing things, during these monthly webinars, some solutions that have been implemented on-premise, or that you can implement on-premise for new reports or new automations. The idea of this SAM Best Practice Hub is to be a central point where you can access, a lot of best practice information. So the link to each of the webinars, the pointers to many published solutions, and this post is articulating the value of the coming, features. So if I go to the post, you will see that actually. You will see that there are 3 sort of dashboards that will be released in the next quarters. And the goal of this dashboard is to address, both ends of the Maslow pyramid, we could call that, for Flexera ITAM or for some software asset management. One which is, getting the foundations. And I said that's boring but necessary. Indeed, this is complicated data, but you need to understand if your inventory is reliable, what are your KPIs, are you performing correctly in managing SAM, is the tool correctly set up? And there are some higher end reports, mostly around the optimization, that will be released in the SAM optimization hub. So all the optimization reports have been released except one that will come in June or July, which is the Adobe optimization or an end user license optimization report. And all of this in this article is actually articulated. So first section is on the best practice. You get the link to each of the best practice sessions. So you will see the May one added to that very soon. The goal is to keep this this article updated, and you will see that the post is sharing a little bit the vision. This is what this SAM optimization, SAM operation hub will be, and it will address the big questions that the SAM managers should be able to answer. Can I trust my inventory? Are my inventory import system tasks successful? Are my beacons reported correctly? So the report and the dashboard will actually address a number of key items that you should be able to answer to be sure that you are operating correctly, and will provide a set of links and links to reports or existing screens. And you will see that there is a number of reports that have already been published in the community that you can implement on-prem. But these reports will be gradually integrated and will become out of the box to manage to be the bricks of this SAM operation hub. So just to give you a preview of what the hubs will look like, the SAM operation hub, transparency hub will look like that, with a table with a number of KPIs. And then it will, address the big questions and give the links to each of the reports. So you will see it's very similar to the post. So hopefully, if you go through the post, it will help you already, anticipating these hubs that will help you and guide you in managing your data. For the people who are on-premise, you could, import and create the reports that will be gradually added to the out-of-the-box solution. And you will be able, in reading this post, you will be able to understand, so the SAM operations, then, the SAM data transparency. You will see a number of additional solutions. Some of them already being published. The application transparency report got published in March. And then, the last hub, and actually the next one, the first one that will be delivered because the report exists, is around SAM optimization. And again, you will see how the optimizations are articulated, and you will get, a pointer to each, an explanation to each of the reports already published. So this is a full picture, on these hubs, and hopefully it gives you a vision on where we go. And there are some other useful community pointers. So some blog posts, some interesting pointers to the documentation, some published solutions around managing Java instances, which has been released actually for cloud customers or current version on-prem customers, the operations guide, and some documents around creating automations or a license duplication wizard, which is also published. And every time you have a link to the eventually published solution. And here, this is a report that allows to create and duplicate licenses, and there is the code and the explanation on the report, which is in the post. So I don't want to spend too much time on that, but I think it's really worth having a look to this document, because it's concatenating a lot of data, a lot of existing solutions, and it gives you a vision where we go. And I'm sure that people, for instance, who manage on a day-to-day basis the SAM in ITAM or in FlexNet Manager will see a value in this SAM operations transparency hub, which gives the visibility and the right data to take action. So that was for the news, and now I'm going to start, deep diving into customization in FlexNet Manager and in ITAM. To give you a little bit more context, so ITAM or FlexNet Manager are not a build-it-yourself platform. I've been myself managing products with other publishers that were extremely rich in building a platform. So you could define your screens, define your database, define the links, but that were not, so deep into the content, which is, having something that quickly allows to inventory, normalize, recognize, and manage contract purchase and license consumptions and optimizations. So first, statement upfront. FlexNet and ITAM are not platforms, so there are some, I would say, reasonably limited areas of customizations. But you will see that actually, if you're not aware of them, you will probably find very interesting information here, and this is what we're going to cover. So the first, easy one, and I will go through that, is extending the UI, adding some fields. You can, customize the way the data is managed with automations. That's another part I will cover. The way the data is imported, you can create reports, which is, classical web reports, but also advanced reports that would be called, SQL reports, and this is more for on-premise. We have two situations today, and I'm talking to customers who are on ITAM, which is the cloud version. A lot can be done, and I will go through that, but there is no direct access to the database. This is a classical thing with the cloud instances. And on-premise, you have more possibilities. I will deep dive into that. But there are also, more, I would say, supportability risk. You could absolutely, create something that prevents FlexNet for upgrading, for instance, or you could create a script that deletes some data. But I would say this is your responsibility to make sure that a report is a read-only script, of course. It's reading the data but not writing into existing tables. So these are the two situations, and I will cover, for each case, what can be done and what can't be done. So first, the extensions of the UI and the fields creation. There is something called in FlexNet custom property, which is actually quite well documented in the documentation, the system reference guide. And if you go to this system reference guide, you will see that the first section is about, adding custom properties. And I will not spend 3 hours in the documentation, but you can customize specific objects, asset, application, contract, purchase, software license, computer, and user and vendor. So basically, the main objects that you manage in FlexNet Manager can be customized and get additional, I would say, attributes or custom fields. And you can add, specific controls such as integer, text box, text area, date, drop-down list, and checkbox. So, and you can, that's one thing which is quite well managed. You can position your control. You can create a new tab. You can position the control between two existing fields that could be out-of-the-box fields. You can create a specific tab at the end of your screen that will be, let's say, custom specific, for custom properties. So this is quite well managed. And going back to the presentation, you see that I listed a little bit. It could be, and the interesting thing is the custom property that you will create will be available in the details, in the list, in the reporting objects, which means that if you create a new report on the web client, you will see these custom properties that could help you. And they will also be available in the Business Adapter Studio as an additional attribute. So this is, a screenshot of the documentation. Best is to read a little bit the documentation, but I will show you, of course, so that you get a more, a better sense of the reality of the custom properties. So first, and just to go back to create a custom property, you can create that on-premise, and that's what I will show, the script, or you can open a ticket if you're a cloud customer. This is a supported extension, opening a ticket, asking which custom property you want to create in which screen, so you have to be precise in the ticket. But once we get this information, we can ourselves run the little script I will show you, which creates additional fields that you can use. So just to give you a real example, I had the luck of implementing a mainframe management project, which is quite specific and quite different from the classical, SAM management activities. And a mainframe, has specific license metrics, has specific, timing and periods. So the idea that contracts in this implementation were hosting the license-specific or the mainframe-specific information, and then there were licenses linked to the contract and automations around that. So if you want to create, for instance, a mainframe tab, which is what you see here, I could show what it looks like in the web UI itself. If you go to, let's say, the contract screen, you will see that, let's open the contract. You will see that in this instance, in this demonstration instance I have on my virtual machine, you will see that there is a specific tab on the contracts, and you can define for which type of contract you want to have these specific custom properties. That's one of the many settings that you set on the property. So once you are on the contract, I should have maybe restarted my virtual machine before the call. You will see that the contract has a number of attributes, number of so I filtered on purpose, on a specific mainframe contract. And if you go to the contract detail, you see this specific tab. And the specific tab, you see here, this mainframe metric, which is a custom property that you can see on the list. And this custom property that you can see on the list, you can also see it on the detail of the contract that contain this mainframe tab. So this is quite slow on my virtual machine. And you see that the mainframe tab contains, so this is a tab. And in the tab, you have a number of, fields. Or you could even have a specific section. You see here, license rule. I could have a second section here. In the page, or I could have inserted my mainframe fields in the other fields in the other pages. So everything is explained in detail in this system reference guide. But just to go back here. Okay, so the mainframe and the script that you need to apply is quite simple. You run and you call a stored procedure, which is called the add tab to web UI property page, for instance. It's quite self-explanatory as a name. And you define, which are the types of contract you want to make this, reference or this section available to. Here, just for the sake of the example, I took all contracts except maintenance and support. So explicit target typed IDs, and then you give it a name, which is which is a sort of technical name. You give it a name which is the on-screen name, and you will be able to eventually make it multilingual. That's a possibility, and you explain where this session and where this section will be located. Then, I've given one example of adding a specific field, which is licensing rules. So, a specific field, and another thing which is a specific. So sorry, I'm a little bit confused. This is a tab. This is the section, which is the license rules, and this is a specific field. And every time, that's quite easy, you put the field on the tab. You put you pick up a type of field, which is the text here, and you can build that way your page with your specific attributes that could be used for your processes, your filters, and so on. Just moving forward a little bit, this custom property, I just wanted to state that you need to think twice before creating one. I've heard sometimes customers asking for a custom property that was an existing field or something that could be managed actually with an existing field or unused attribute. So I would say, best is to use the out-of-the-box design. Best is to use, let's say, an existing field if it could do the job, because there are sometimes some additional logic. Let's imagine you want to create, an internal status for the device, and you say that's ignored. In no way the license reconciliation will check your custom property as an internal status. It will check the device status, which could be ignored or active. So you have to be careful that you don't reinvent the wheel and the wheel that will not roll, because the out-of-the-box logic of the tool is not taking into account your custom properties. So after stating this, warning on creating custom properties, the data is stored in specific tables. So there are, for instance, for the contract, you have a contract property table, which will contain, for each contract type, the property names and their specific attributes. And you have the contract property value, which means that if you have, let's say, in this screen, ZOS V2 as a reference application, it will actually be, a value of ZOS V2 into the contract property, which is called reference app, which has itself, a name, an ID, and so on. So I just wanted to say, it's quite tricky to query and to add a custom property in a SQL statement if you want to query all the data for the contracts, including, let's say, this application, reference application. Because this is not just a field in a specific contract table, we are creating a contract property and a contract value. Okay, that said, once you have created the custom property, you will have this custom property displayed in your object. For instance, here we took the contract. So the contract object in the business adapter, after reopening the business adapter so that you can load the definition from your database, will be appearing. So you can map in an inventory import some custom properties, or in a business adapter import some custom properties. The object will be available in the list, which is what we saw actually a little bit earlier with this mainframe metric in the contract screen. And finally, when you build a new report, you will see, here the same mainframe metric, for instance, available in the list of attributes of the contracts. So that's quite well designed. It works fine, but I would say this is just a field. You can't create a link between two tables and make sure that when the first table is updated, the link is also updated. So this is, I would say, additional information that typically would be needed if you have, let's say, an internal contract number and a vendor contract number. You can check again, of course, before deciding to create a custom property, but typically this is a simple, text field that will be useful in the reports and in the screens, and you can then create this specific custom property that would be named external vendor contract number, for instance. Okay, so that was the first thing I wanted to show. Second thing that you may want to do, and I said this is not exactly a customization, but this is an automation. You may want to avoid doing manual tasks. The the goal of managing SAM in ITAM or in FlexNet Manager is not to click and click and click again. So there are ways of avoiding manual tasks in the UI. Typical manual tasks would be setting locations for computers or devices, setting status, allocating users to licenses or devices to licenses. Of course, you know, there are ways you can avoid doing that manually. When possible, try to use the Business Adapter Studio, which is a very good tool to update reading, you know, from any source. Maybe I can just show it. This is not specifically, you know, a session on the Business Adapter, but if you go here, you know, on the Business Adapter Studio, it's this one. You can very easily, in the Business Adapter Studio, read from any source. So if I go on the top, you see that there are multiple sources that you can pick up. Of course, you know, this is more an admin activity. An end user in FlexNet would not have access to the application server or the beacon. However, if you are doing as an end user painful tasks which are taking hours, I've seen you know, customers or partners allocating users and computers for hours. There is a very easy way you could create, you know, such a business adapter, which is allocating users here to licenses based on the Adobe extract. Another step could be to read from the Active Directory, the Adobe groups, and directly allocating the users to the right licenses thanks to the groups that you can find in Active Directory. So many possibilities with this business adapter. And keep in mind that the business adapter can read in a third-party tool, but could also read eventually in the FlexNet Manager database if you want to do something like a loop. If you want to, let's say, take the computers, update the location based on the computer name and load the computer location back to FlexNet, you could do that in the business adapter, either on the full version, which is available to on-prem customers, or with the beacon version. You can, you know, access the data, read the data, process the data, and in the end, update the records, closing the loop. I will develop a little bit this sort of read in FlexNet, write in FlexNet approach. So you can read FlexNet through the SQL connection, or you could eventually, which means that this is for on-prem customers, or you could access the database using the web service connection or you know, a web service REST or SOAP API call via a PowerShell or via the Business Adapter Studio. So here, you know, I will spend more time, you know, on that. But you know, the business adapter is a very useful tool that is, I would say, managed by administrators, but that could be initiated by users because sometimes an admin doesn't know that you spend hours doing, you know, basic operation that could be performed with the business adapter import. So that's good that you eventually, you know, give some requirements to the admins or to the consultants who deploy, who manage FlexNet or ITAM, Flexera 1 ITAM, and people will be able to create business adapters. Next approach, you know, is to use some scripts. Scripts can be performed in ITAM Cloud. That would be my next slide. By reading the data. Then, you know, locally performing complex scripts in a local SQL database or in a complex PowerShell script, for instance. And then, you know, you can update the exposed objects back into ITAM. And when I talk about exposed object, just to be very clear, you know, in the business adapter, there is a number of objects that you can expose: the asset, the license, eventually, you know, a certain license allocation or even a license key. You can update the corporate units, locations, categories. You can update the vendor, the users, but you know, there are things you cannot do, such as, for instance, updating the consumption of a of a license or of a custom metric license. This is unfortunately not exposed as an attribute of the license. If I open here, the license, you see that within an object, you have a number of exposed attributes, and sometimes things are not exposed. So what I mean is that if you are a cloud customer, you can read data using the SOAP API or the REST APIs, and we are releasing more and more of them. And you can update back, but only for the object that the business adapter can read and can write on by using the business adapter. And where I'm talking about scripts, that because locally you could do very sophisticated things in SQL or in a PowerShell. On-premise, this is a little bit more extensive because you have the ability to create actually a SQL query that could be in a stored procedure. And you could, either have a custom step in the inventory import. Once a day you have the inventory import happening. You could have an additional step that will run a little query. I will show you an example. Or you could use the full version of the business adapter. There is something when you use on-premise the business adapter, which has SQL access to the database. You can actually use this object, which is called a custom query. So just be careful, if you're on-prem, you need to first, in the options, you need to make sure that you have, show advanced options equals yes. Eventually, you could do show a property list. And once you have done that, if you want to add a new object, you have the possibility to have a custom query. And here, you have to be extremely careful because the custom query can actually create table, alter tables, and eventually do complex, SQL queries. So I would say, this is I would say a dangerous weapon, powerful but dangerous weapon. But this is, one way you could actually perform some scripts. Typically, if you want a business importer that cleans up some data before importing some data, you could have a step which is a SQL query that does the SQL cleanup before the business adapter is importing data from an Excel file, for instance. And finally, an option that is not the preferred one, in my view, is a SQL agent. You could have, for instance, an agent that once a week runs a query that deactivates all computers which have not been used for more than 90 days. Not a computer that have not been inventoried. So it's a quite simple query. And that reactivates all the computers that have been inventoried recently, but that were still, ignored because of the same script. You could run that through a SQL agent, but the inconvenience with the SQL agent is that you could have eventually some logs. Let's imagine you run a query while an inventory import is going on. You could have the SQL script, conflicting with another process which is happening. While here, if you are on-premise and if you have a custom step in the inventory, good thing is that during the inventory, all other processes are locked and stopped. So it means that you can perform a step which will be in the right sequence, and the action you will do here will not conflict typically with the most risky, I would say, process in terms of locking records and so on, which is the inventory import, because it will be integrated as a step in the inventory import. So hopefully I'm not losing you, but there are many ways of doing automations. And, the first one, the little development I wanted to do on the business adapter, there are two versions of the business adapter. One is, the full version. You install the Business Adapter Studio and you run it. Another one is you run the beacon. You start the beacon UI. So unfortunately, on my local instance, the beacon UI doesn't include the Business Adapter because it's a version that includes the application server and the beacon UI. So I will run the beacon, but on the beacon, you have a section on the business adapter that I don't have, so it won't be very impressive. And if you start and create a new business adapter from the beacon, you will get nearly the same UI as this one, but you won't get the additional possibilities of a custom SQL query. There will be things that you can do on the beacon UI, so which is, I would say, a limitation. However, you will have the positive thing, which is everything happening from the beacon is logged, and all the logs will appear in the system tasks. So here, I don't have a section which is called business adapter, but if you have a classical beacon which is not having the application server and the beacon, you will get, a line which is business adapter, and when you click on new, you will exactly have the same type of UI. With a little bit less capabilities because there is no direct SQL connection between a beacon and the database, which makes sense, when you think about cloud customers. Okay, so I will move forward a little bit. Pro, it's logging. All the logs will appear in the web UI. This is compatible with ITAM Cloud, which is good. You can schedule directly on the beacon. So this is not the case with the full version of the business adapter, where you need to create a scheduled task. On the downside, you have no access to the database, which is classical for cloud customers, which means that you can't have these advanced queries, deletion, or you can only update the exposed objects. The full version, that's a little bit the reverse. You need to activate the advanced option and show the properties, just like I showed. And then you have some options to use physical tables. So the business adapter will create a physical table, and then you can have a query that is using the data in this table and joining to existing data to do whatever update or deletion that you want to do. So this is a superpower but dangerous weapon. So just to keep in mind that only people who are skilled in SQL should use these sort of automations using SQL scripts. If you are a cloud customer, there is a link here to a post I've made a while ago on the community. And this post is actually explaining step by step. There is an attached Word document. It's explaining how you can create, if you're a cloud customer, a very advanced, integration. Here I provide an example where you 200-line SQL script will check, for each device which has no location, it will check first what is the IP address. So it's mapping the subnet with the location. Then it's checking, the name and the domain of the device, and finally the name. So just a showcase that you can have actually a very advanced script running to automate things. And typically what you want to automate is the status, the entity of the device, and eventually some allocations. And the way you can automate that very advanced way is by, reading into the cloud instance using the web service, either SOAP API or RESTful API. Performing from the beacon, you can access a local SQL database or SQL Express eventually to perform any scripting you want, and you update from the beacon, Business Adapter Studio. You can update the cloud instance for the supported objects and attributes. So that's if you're a cloud customer, don't imagine that your only way to perform things is to eventually extract things from Excel, from the web UI, re-import through a business adapter, and have a human being performing an activity. We could imagine that once a day, a script reads the data, updates whatever, given whatever business logic you want to apply, and re-updates back the data into FlexNet Manager Cloud, or into ITAM. Okay, so I keep moving on. Just a little, parenthesis on the REST APIs. Right now, we have a number of REST APIs which exist. just showing you the documentation, which is public. The REST API, contain data for the devices, for the licenses, for the applications, and a new one that was recently added, which is the license consumption. So that has been added in March. And the license consumption is interesting. It will collect for each license, so it's per license. It will collect all the data, which device is consuming, what is the cost, what is the license, what is the cost per write of the license, what is the chargeback cost, which is a complicated topic. So just keep in mind that reading data into ITAM Cloud is possible through the SOAP API. There is a SOAP API called Get Custom View Result. But if you are not a fan of using SOAP APIs, which are not on the modern side, you can use the existing REST APIs, or you can even wait a little bit. By June or July, we will have the same behavior as the Get Custom View Result, which is a generic REST API that will return as an output the result of any custom web report that you could create. So if you create a report showing all the users belonging to an entity which have, I don't know, specific, status, this data will be available through a REST API call that would basically say get custom view results and with the view ID, and you will get the data as a REST API response. Okay, so I think that's it. You have the full version, and then you update back the cloud instance. Moving forward, you can have more choice on-premise, of course, because you can create a new stored procedure in the database, and the idea that you can create a stored procedure which will store any SQL that contains a business logic. Typically, activate computers which are inactive and recently inventoried, and deactivate computers which have been not inventoried for more than 90 days. But you need to be careful that you prefix the stored procedure to avoid, an upgrade to overwrite your stored procedure with an out-of-the-box one, which will take your SQL data away. Once you have a sort of a secured stored procedure with the right prefix, you can call the stored procedure by an agent, which will be scheduled with the inconvenience that it could be looking some records, or by a custom step in the custom inventory. And here, that's a preferred approach. I already explained that. And I have one example in this documentation. And yes, so that's the next slide, so I will spend more time. Customizing the inventory is something that is quite, mature and quite sophisticated, and that people don't know so much. So again, you need to be an expert. You need to know how FlexNet works. This is only on-prem. But what you can do when you have on the batch process, on the batch server, batch application server, you will see that there is a folder called, program data, Flexera software. So program data, Flexera software, and import procedures. And then you have, a custom inventory, or you have an inventory folder which exists that contains all the writers and all the readers. And you can create a custom inventory. You need to name it that way, folder, and you can create, a writer step in the custom inventory. And FlexNet Manager has a logic that will assess before any import. It will assess, if there is a custom inventory folder, first step. And before running any inventory, it will make a diff between what is out of the box in the inventory folder. In the inventory folder, you will have writer, and then you will have computer.xml that creates a computer. You will have applications or install software.xml that creates the installed application. You will have the reconciliation.xml that contains all the logic of managing the reconciliation. And if you create in this custom inventory / let's say writer slash, if you create a new file which is called license reconciliation.xml, license reconcile, you will actually influence the way the data gets imported, and the import will either run your additional sequence if that's a specific writer. Here, I've created a step which is 1001. You will see in the out-of-the-box license reconciliation.xml, you don't have 1000, you have 1000, 1010. So here, typically the script will say, okay, after the step 1000, I will run this one, and this one does an allocation of computers to licenses, for instance. Or if you modified an existing step, let's say the step 1000, and you have a fix, a specific fix, the inventory import will actually run this step, which is in the custom inventory, and not the out of the box one that was containing something. So typically, you would start from the existing step. You would modify eventually a step in the SQL logic. You would document very clearly that this is my modification, and you will save this file, let's say license reconciliation.xml, but you will make sure that you only keep the customized part in this file, because typically these files have thousands of rows. So you would take a risk by doing one modification, not documenting it, and letting the full huge file, with the hidden change you made. And one important thing, is to make sure that after each migration, you recheck the customizations you have made, because these out-of-the-box files, and maybe I should have shown, on the instance, the out-of-the-box files will change every time you will upgrade. So if I go to, program data, I will go then to, let's say, compliance, then, import procedures. And then you have this inventory, which is the out-of-the-box one. Here you have all the readers. These are the steps where you read into the source applications. You have the writer, which is a step where you actually perform the import and all the work which is visible in the web UI. And typically, if I take the license reconciliation.xml, if I open it, you will see that it's a very massive file that contains, this one is not so big. But if you change something in one step, you'd better, take everything away, document what you change. And what will need to happen is that at the next upgrade, you will need to check that this step still exists, that the modification you made still makes sense. And if there was a change in the step, you will need to actually reapply the customization you made to the step that has been now modified in the new out-of-the-box step. And all this you don't do in this writer folder. You will do that in the custom inventory folder, which is the best way to make sure that at the next upgrade, everything in this inventory folder will be overwritten and refreshed, while your customizations, and here, I've done some dummy customizations, but your customizations here will be, separate, saved. But, if this step is now an existing out-of-the-box step, I'd better change and rename it, by, let's say, 1002. So just wanted to make sure that, this is really powerful, because this is adding, without risk of locks, additional logic that will happen at the right time. Allocating a server just before you reconcile the license is the best time to do it. So this is really powerful, but you need to be aware that any new upgrade will you will need to make sure that you didn't you replace the logic. I'm moving forward a little bit because we're close to the end. Customizations. So I will be fast, but because you have no access to the central server, to the application server, you can't customize the writers because they are shared by customers. But on the reader side, if you read, let's say, in SCCM and you want a specific step to read into SCCM, one issue that the files are copied from the application server. So this is a central, central server owns the import logic and pushes to all of the beacons, including, the cloud customer beacons, these files. So what you can do is you can derive actually an out-of-the-box reader, and I've given a pointer to a post in the community where you will see that actually you can create sort of a SCCM2 connection, but just by changing some of the configuration files, so that in your beacon you will have a separate folder storing the reader logic, all the files, your customized reader logic, and even if you're on the cloud, the out-of-the-box folders will be modified, but not your local customized one. Just very quickly on that. Okay, and then the last two things I wanted to show. This is on-premise only. You can create a custom SQL report. You will see the first document I presented, this some best practice hub, contains a lot of links to solutions that contain custom reports. And these reports, again, are gradually implemented and productized. So that's a good thing for everyone. And on the on-prem instance, you can actually create a report. This is really easy. So, if you take the text of this report, let's go here. If you go to SQL Server Management Studio, okay, if you go here, if you run a new query, you are on FlexNet, which has, in the reports, I don't have any report named my custom report, my custom view. It's not a beautiful one, but okay, so I'm checking here, in the reports, nothing is called my custom view. If I run that, very simple, which has a stored procedure creation step and a report creation step, custom report. You run this, and going on the web client, you refresh, you have the report. I didn't test it, so I just hope it will not fail, but normally the SQL works fine. And you get the report, which is exactly behaving like the other computers, the other reports. So you can, group by, you can filter, you can. This is a quick way. Once you know, and once you have a good knowledge on SQL, which is not easy, but you have many examples delivered in the community of SQL reports, you can actually go beyond what the reporting allows if you want to do something complex, which is making a super complex filter, taking two values, comparing them before putting a comment. You can actually, just by using this logic, which is create a stored procedure, make sure this is prefixed. Actually, I did not apply the best logic I'm saying, but you need to be very specific to make sure that this custom stored procedure will not conflict with any out-of-the-box one. And once you have these two steps, create the stored procedure, make sure that the query, is working. That's it. It is working if I run it. Make sure that your column names are unique. That's an important thing, and have a name. And you can create the report, and even, you can scope the report by an inner join. So I have a little document that explains how to create custom reports that gives, some tips and tricks, and that's quite straightforward. You need to know SQL, you need to understand the FlexNet Manager database schema, but that's a possibility on premise. Okay, and I'm very close to the end, but I wanted to finish with one more step, which I will not develop a lot, but you can even create a custom web reporting object, which means that if you want to, for instance, days since last inventory, and again, everything I'm showing will be productized, short-term or long-term or mid-term, but typically, if you want to create a report on the computers And if you want to filter on the inventory date, which is more than 90 days, unfortunately, the date is not possible because it's not a relative number. So with this little script, you can create actually one more column. This is how we store the data, column, compliance type column. And this column will actually be added to the existing object, which is computer, and will have a select, which is a dead diff between of a field that already exists. So this field will show you the number of days since the last inventory. The vCenter, for instance, vCenter are typically, the IP address in the cluster name is on the left of the cluster. It's called the cluster external name. So you can add the vCenter IP address attribute just by running this little example. And I have a more complex one. Higher complexity, this is for experts only. But if I go here to the, I have a number of documents, but this document, which is creating a computer license consumption object, this one shows, how you can, maybe I should go, I will go directly in SQL Server Management Studio. Okay. So here you see a first step will register some strings. A second step will, make sure that there is a number of things, but you need to add the string and the translation because this is multilingual. Once you have created, the string and the translation, you can create a view. Again, be careful to make sure that this view will never overlap with an existing one. And actually, this view will be used by the object. So here you see compliance, compliance view type register. So here, this one will actually register a new object called the computer consumption, license consumption. And this computer license consumption object will call the view, which is showing the flat list of columns, which are, this is a computer name, this is the license name, this is the consumption. This is quite similar to the new API, REST API that has been released, which is the license consumption and the chargeback REST API. And once you have this object created, it's a little bit complex because there are some out-of-the-box filtering which need to be applied. You can create a link between this object and the other object that exists. And finally, you can even, create one by one the columns. Once you have created the object, the links with the other objects, you can create the columns, and you will have in FlexNet the ability to create a new report once you run this BigQuery. And if you create a new report, you will have the ability to pick up, this computer license consumption. And if you do that, you see that it links to the other objects. So you can link to a license. It shows all the attributes, while it was just, this object, but it is linked to the other ones. So you can go, and take the license dot, you can take then any linked object to build a complex report because you are linked to all the rest of the existing web reporting objects. So maybe, not to, I will actually put this as an example. It just shows that, virtually you have unlimited capabilities for creating the reporting, the new columns to existing objects and even new objects. And the idea is, of course, that based on your ideas, based on your requests, we expand what FlexNet can do. And this will be available out of the box. But that's interesting to see that we have quite a generic design that allows to even, expand the web reporting objects. Okay, that will be it for today. And sorry for having been a little bit longer than wished. Thanks for your time, and talk to you in the next SAM best practice webinar. Thank you. Bye.